Imagine a world where mammoths roamed the earth. Massive creatures, majestic, and a little wonky? Yeah, some of the last mammoths to ever exist were so inbred, they were practically falling apart. Okay, maybe not that dramatic, but the truth is, inbreeding really did a number on the final mammoths. Some scientists think it was one of the big reasons they went extinct. Others, not so much. In today's video, we'll be looking at and talking about the genetic mess that was the last mammoths on Earth, and if it was actually the reason they went extinct. Mammoths roamed the Earth for millions of years, primarily during the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs. These epochs spanned from around 5.3 million years ago to approximately 11,700 years ago, with the Pleistocene often referred to as the Ice Age. The climate during this time was characterized by repeated glaciations, where vast ice sheets covered large portions of North America, Europe, and Asia. These glaciations were interspersed with interglacial periods, where temperatures temporarily rose, allowing ice to recede. The cyclical nature of these glaciations played a critical role in shaping mammoth habitats, as they thrived in the cold and open landscapes of the Northern Hemisphere. During glacial periods, much of the world's water was locked up in massive ice sheets, leading to lower sea levels. This exposed land bridges, such as the Bering Land Bridge, which connected present-day Siberia and Alaska. These land connections allowed mammoths to migrate across continents, adapting to different environments along the way. The cold climate supported the growth of vast steppe tundra ecosystems, which were dominated by grasses, sedges, and shrubs, which were ideal food sources for mammoths. Despite their enormous size, mammoths were herbivores, consuming large quantities of vegetation to sustain themselves. Their presence in these ecosystems played a crucial role in maintaining the balance of plant life, as their grazing helped prevent the overgrowth of certain plant species. The most widely recognized mammoth species, the woolly mammoth, Mammothus primigenius, was particularly well adapted to the frigid conditions of the Ice Age. They had long, shaggy fur with an insulating undercoat, a hump of fat on their backs to store energy, and long, curved tusks that they used to dig through snow to access buried vegetation. These adaptations allowed them to dominate cold environments, expanding their range across North America, Europe, and Northern Asia. But the final population of woolly mammoths on Wrangel Island had none of that luck. As mammoths spread across these regions, their area of influence extended to multiple ecosystems, shaping the environment through their interactions with vegetation and other animal species. These colossal creatures, towering at a staggering up to 4 meters, 13 feet tall at the shoulder, and weighing as much as 10 tons, 20,000 pounds, covered in thick fur and sporting long, curved tusks, roamed vast territories stretching from North America to Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. The average woolly mammoth was larger than regular African elephants of today and way heavier. Adapted to the harsh conditions of the Ice Age, they grazed on tough grasses, shrubs, and even bark, using their formidable tusks to clear snow and access buried vegetation. Their presence shaped the landscape much like modern elephants do today, helping maintain the balance of the ecosystem. Mammoths were highly social animals, living in herds led by experienced matriarchs. Their social structures helped them navigate seasonal migrations, locate food, and protect vulnerable members from predators like saber-toothed cats and packs of Ice Age wolves. These massive creatures played a crucial role in the Ice Age environment. By trampling vegetation, dispersing seeds, and digging through snow for food, they helped maintain the open grasslands that supported a variety of other species. Their dung also enriched the soil, contributing to a healthy ecosystem. So, mammoths were not just passive inhabitants of their world, they actively shaped the landscapes they roamed. For most of their existence, mammoths thrived despite the harsh climates they faced. Their thick woolly coats and layers of fat insulated them from freezing temperatures, and their long, curved tusks were useful tools for foraging and defense. They adapted to the changing seasons, following food sources and water supplies across vast distances. fossilized remains reveal that mammoths lived in various habitats, from cold tundras to temperate regions, proving their remarkable ability to adapt. But then something happened. About 10,000 years ago, most of them just vanished. Poof, gone. One minute they were everywhere, the next, not so much. The decline of mammoths coincided with the end of the Pleistocene epoch and the onset of the Holocene when global temperatures began to rise. This warming led to significant ecological shifts, including the retreat of ice sheets and the disappearance of the steppe tundra biome, which had sustained mammoth populations for millennia. Human hunting pressure might also have played an active role in the disappearance of mainland mammoth populations, as the spread of sapiens strangely coincide with the disappearance of megafauna pretty much everywhere they went. But still, some mammoth populations found refuge in isolated locations, where they managed to survive thousands of years beyond their mainland counterparts. One of the most significant of these refugia was Wrangel Island, a remote landmass in the Arctic Ocean. It is widely accepted today that most extinct species usually just couldn't adapt to a set of pressure factors on their populations, be it climate change, hunting, disappearance of prey, of food sources, and so on. We often see extinction as the consequences of all these external factors, but then, why would the Wrangel Island mammoth went extinct if it was the case? Well, turns out the blessing, and what protected Wrangel Island mammoth in the first place, their isolation from mainland, became later on their curse and cause of downfall. In contrast to their huge ancestors, the Wrangel Island mammoths were significantly smaller. Due to their isolated and resource-limited environment, they experienced a phenomenon called insular dwarfism, a process where large mammals evolved to become smaller over time in restricted habitats. The last Wrangel Island mammoths stood only 1.8 to 2.3 meters, 6 to 7.5 feet, tall, roughly the size of a modern Asian elephant, and weighed around 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms, 4,400 to 6,600 pounds. Their tusks were shorter and often more fragile. By the time Wrangel Island's mammoths were cut off from the rest of the world, their numbers had dwindled to a dangerously low level already, somewhere between 300 and 500 individuals. At first, they survived, but with no new genes entering the population, mutations started to accumulate, and not the cool X-Men kind. Genetic diversity is the backbone of any thriving species. It ensures that harmful mutations are kept in check, while beneficial traits can spread through a population. When populations are large and diverse, natural selection has a better chance of eliminating disadvantageous genes. However, when numbers dwindle, this system starts to break down. Harmful mutations accumulate, and without a natural pressure, caused like predators, or without enough genetic variation to counteract them, the survival of the species becomes a precarious gamble. One example of this is the Isle Royale wolves, a small, isolated population of gray wolves in Michigan. Over time, inbreeding became so severe that genetic defects started appearing, including spinal deformities that made movement difficult. With fewer healthy individuals, their ability to hunt and sustain their pack dynamics collapsed, leading to an even sharper population decline. Researchers attempted to introduce new wolves to restore genetic diversity, but by then the damage had already been done, and the population struggled to recover. Another striking case is the heath hen, a bird that once thrived in North America. After hunting and habitat loss reduced their numbers, the last remaining population was confined to Martha's Vineyard. With so few individuals left, inbreeding took its toll, leading to weakened immune systems and increased vulnerability to disease. Eventually, a harsh winter and an outbreak of illness wiped them out completely, making them one of the first documented cases of extinction due to genetic bottlenecking. The Florida panther also faced a similar genetic crisis. By the 1990s, fewer than 30 individuals remained, and signs of inbreeding depression were everywhere, from heart defects and kinked tails to reproductive failures, all plaguing the population significantly. Conservationists intervened by introducing a small number of Texas cougars to increase genetic diversity. a risky move that ultimately helped the species rebound. I think you get it by now. This was the unfortunate fate of the last known population of woolly mammoths, which lived on Wrangel Island until about 4,000 years ago. The Wrangel Island mammoths were among the last survivors of a species that had once roamed vast territories across Eurasia and North America. For thousands of years, mammoths had endured harsh ice age conditions, migrating and interbreeding across expansive ranges. This movement and genetic mixing helped maintain the species' overall health. By the time pyramids were up, this population was only a mere shadow of what used to be their mammoth ancestors. As the climate changed and human hunting intensified, mammoth populations fragmented. By the time the Wrangel Island group became isolated, they were cut off from these vital genetic exchanges. And unlike their counterparts, the classical mammoths, this restriction is an unfortunate pipeline to inbreeding and, in turn, genetic deformities. By the time these mammoths were forced into retiring on this small island, the population was already too small and was already prey to inbreeding. They never had a chance in the first place. Modern research into the genomes of these mammoths has revealed an alarming number of harmful mutations that likely contributed to their final demise. Scientists compared the DNA of a Wrangel Island mammoth that lived about 4,300 years ago to that of older mammoths from much larger populations, as well as modern-day Asian elephants. The results were striking. Many of the mammoth's genes were broken due to genetic defects that accumulated over generations. One of the most significant genetic issues found in the Wrangel Island mammoth was related to reproduction. Scientists discovered mutations in genes associated with reduced male fertility. In a small, isolated population, such defects can be devastating. If fewer males are able to reproduce effectively, the genetic bottleneck tightens even further, increasing the likelihood of additional mutations spreading unchecked. Over time, this cycle of inbreeding and declining reproductive success could have severely limited the mammoth's ability to sustain their population. Another critical genetic defect found in the Wrangel Island mammoth involved insulin signaling. This system regulates how the body processes sugars and maintains energy levels. Mutations in these genes likely led to a condition resembling diabetes, affecting the mammoth's ability to store and use energy efficiently. In an environment where food availability fluctuated, this could have been a severe disadvantage. A compromised ability to regulate blood sugar levels might have made it harder for these mammoths to store fat for harsh winters, reducing their resilience against starvation. Perhaps one of the most bizarre genetic defects discovered in the Wrangel Island mammoth was the loss of their ability to smell properly. This mutation affected olfactory receptors, which are the proteins responsible for detecting scents in the environment. In modern elephants, the sense of smell is crucial for finding food, recognizing other individuals, and even detecting water sources over long distances. If Wrangel Island mammoths suffered from impaired olfaction, they would have faced significant challenges in locating food and navigating their environment. This sensory deficit, combined with other accumulating genetic defects, likely made survival even more difficult. Beyond these specific mutations, scientists also found evidence that the Wrangel Island mammoth's genome was riddled with what are known as loss-of-function mutations. These are changes that disrupt the normal operation of genes, often rendering them completely inactive. Over generations, these defects can accumulate, eroding the biological functions necessary for survival. Researchers noted that many of these mutations affected processes related to growth, metabolism, and immune response. A weakened immune system, for example, could have made these mammoths more vulnerable to diseases, while disrupted metabolic processes could have further compromised their ability to maintain energy levels. The Wrangel Island mammoths had been isolated for only a few thousand years, yet their genome showed significant deterioration compared to earlier populations. This suggests that, once a population falls below a certain threshold, genetic decline can occur at a surprisingly rapid pace. The Wrangel Island mammoths were not just facing external challenges such as climate shifts or human hunting pressure. They were also fighting an invisible battle within their own DNA. And this still happens in other species today, not just extinct ones like mammoths. Take cheetahs, for example. Today's cheetahs are so genetically similar to each other that they could basically be clones. This is because their ancestors went through a serious bottleneck thousands of years ago, and they've never fully recovered. Some studies suggest that the population was reduced to as few as 7 individuals at one point, meaning today's cheetahs are all descendants of an incredibly tiny gene pool. What does this mean for cheetahs? Well, for one, their immune systems are severely compromised. In a healthy population, genetic variation allows some individuals to resist certain diseases better than others, helping the species as a whole survive outbreaks. But with cheetahs, this variation is nearly non-existent. If one cheetah is vulnerable to a disease, chances are all of them are. Their immune systems struggle to distinguish between their own cells and foreign invaders. On top of that, their reproductive health has taken a hit. Many cheetahs suffer from low fertility and high cub mortality rates, which makes their already fragile population even more at risk. And if you think that sounds bad, imagine being a mammoth on a tiny island with an even smaller dating pool. Another species facing severe consequences of inbreeding is the kakapo, a flightless parrot from New Zealand. This nocturnal, ground-dwelling bird once flourished across the islands, but habitat destruction and introduced predators nearly wiped them out. By the time conservationists intervened, fewer than 50 kakapos remained, and they were all closely related. Like cheetahs, kakapos suffer from poor genetic diversity, which has led to a range of issues. One of the most concerning is their reproductive struggles. Many kakapo eggs are infertile, and even when eggs do hatch, the chicks often have developmental issues. Conservationists have tried to counteract this by carefully managing breeding efforts, using genetic analysis to determine the least related pairs. But the genetic damage from the past bottleneck still lingers. Another problem? Disease vulnerability. With such a limited genetic pool, the kakapo population is at constant risk of being wiped out by illness. A single outbreak could devastate the species, which is why conservationists go to extreme lengths to protect them, even providing medical care and quarantining sick individuals to prevent a catastrophe. So, was inbreeding the final nail in the mammoth coffin? Some scientists say yes. When a population is already on thin ice, pun intended, genetic problems can push it over the edge. It is called a genetic bottleneck. Once a population shrinks past a certain point, there are so few individuals left that genetic diversity becomes dangerously low. The Wrangel Island mammoths were dealing with bad genes, weak immune systems, and possibly struggling to even recognize each other's scent, which, makes it kind of hard to find a mate. A genetic bottleneck is like a reset button that does not work properly. When only a small group of animals survive a major decline, they pass down a very limited set of genes. If those genes include harmful mutations, those problems become permanent in future generations. And if there is no fresh DNA from outside the population, the effects keep stacking up. We have seen this before. The woolly mammoth was not the only species to go through this kind of crisis. The black-footed ferret almost went extinct, with only a handful of individuals left in the wild. Every ferret alive today comes from just 7 ancestors. This extreme loss of genetic diversity has had lasting effects. Inbreeding among the remaining ferrets has led to weakened immune systems, making them highly susceptible to diseases like canine distemper and sylvatic plague. Conservationists have gone to great lengths to protect them, including vaccination programs and captive breeding, but their limited gene pool still poses a risk to the species' long-term survival. Another example is the Przewalski's horse, the last truly wild horse species, native to the steppes of Central Asia. By the mid-20th century, the species was declared extinct in the wild, with only a handful of individuals surviving in zoos. Every Przewalski's horse today descends from just 12 horses that were part of captive breeding efforts. while conservationists have successfully reintroduced them into the wild, their genetic bottleneck remains a concern. With such a limited ancestral pool, these horses are more prone to genetic disorders and have a reduced ability to adapt to environmental changes. Scientists are now using advanced techniques, including cloning and selective breeding, to help increase genetic diversity. To make matters worse, habitat loss and poaching continue to threaten wild cheetahs, limiting their already fragile numbers. Conservationists have attempted to counteract their genetic issues through careful breeding strategies and habitat protection, but without new genetic material, their long-term survival remains uncertain. Scientists have even considered genetic rescue, introducing genes from closely related species, but ethical and practical challenges make this difficult. Despite these challenges, efforts to preserve and protect cheetahs continue as researchers search for new ways to ensure their survival in the wild. Once a species reaches this point, recovery is nearly impossible without outside help. The Wrangel Island mammoths had no new genes coming in, no way to fix their mutations, and no chance of bouncing back. Inbreeding might not have been the only reason they died out, but it definitely did not do them any favors. So what really happened? It is possible that it was not just one thing. Maybe it was a combination of climate change, food shortages, and genetic decline all working together. The last mammoths were facing problem after problem, and eventually, they just could not keep going. In the end, mammoths just went extinct in the saddest way possible, isolated on Wrangel Island, barely functioning, crippled by their own genetics. As a mere shadow of what once was, this feels pretty sad and pitiful to say the least. If we want to protect endangered animals today, we have to think about genetics, habitats, and human impact. Otherwise, we might end up watching history repeat itself. And so, the last mammoths faded into history, not with a dramatic battle for survival, but with a slow, quiet decline written in their very DNA. Their story is a powerful reminder of how fragile species can become when their numbers dwindle and genetic diversity collapses. But what do you think? Was inbreeding the true final blow for the mammoths, or was their fate already sealed by climate change and human expansion? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed diving into the mysteries of lost species, don't forget to subscribe to Endling Echoes for more deep dives into the stories of creatures that once roamed the earth. And if you want to keep exploring the incredible rise and fall of prehistoric giants, click on the video on your screen right now. It's another fascinating look at extinction and survival.